who wasn't able to make it. And we'll get started now. So welcome to the Skyway $5 million Fund for Affordable Housing RFP info session. Thanks so much for your interest in this RFP. This meeting is brought to you by King County's Department of Community and Human Services and the Skyway $5 million Fund for Affordable Housing Community Advisory Committee. Closed captioning is available. It is machine operated, so unfortunately it's not 100% accurate. Closed captioning can be turned on and off at any point by going to the More option on your menu bar and selecting Live Transcript. So our facilitation team today includes Kristen Pula, Jim Gayton, Joanna Armstrong, and myself, Yasmin Perez from DCHS. We do not have a Community Advisory Committee member with us today. In this session, we will introduce the Skyway $5 million Fund for Affordable Housing. We'll review the criteria and key components of the RFP, and we'll provide additional information to support potential applicants, and we'll have time for live questions and answers. After the welcome, we'll review the fund's origin and background and then review the core aspects of the RFP. We'll have about 20 minutes for question and answer following the RFP presentation. But if you have a question during the presentation, feel free to drop any questions you have into the chat. We will have folks monitoring the chat to make sure we're capturing any questions put there. After the Q&A, we'll review some additional information about submitting your RFP and the RFP review process and timeline. And we'll have a few minutes at the end for any closing questions. So I'm going to hand it off to Kristen and we'll start the presentation.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Kristen Pula, Capital Programs Manager. Been supporting this RFP process. It's good to be here. So we'll start off the session with some background about Skyway and the origins and purpose of this fund. As most of you know, Skyway-West Hill is an area of unincorporated King County that's bordered by Seattle at the north, Tukwila to the west, and Renton to the south. And it's a neighborhood that is majority Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and is experiencing increasing displacement pressure from rising housing costs. So the purpose of this fund is to invest $5 million to support equitable community-driven development of affordable housing located in the Skyway-West Hill neighborhood. In particular, the fund is designed to support projects that are being led and stewarded by community-based organizations with strong ties to the neighborhood. This funding is the first county investment in affordable housing in Skyway-West Hill in over a decade. And next slide. This fund is a result of years of community organizing. Skyway advocates worked with council members Ahuai to secure $5 million for affordable housing from the 2021-2022 Housing and Community Development Biennial budget. So there are two fund sources that are being used to make up this $5 million fund, and each has different requirements and restrictions around income levels that the housing must serve, and we'll get into that a little bit later. One fund is called the short-term lodging tax, and the other fund is known as 1406. It's a sales tax authorized by the state level. And I will turn it back to Yasmin.
Thanks, Kristen. So this slide goes over the primary objectives for the fund. And the primary objectives are to invest in new affordable housing that can serve Skyway-West Hill residents vulnerable to displacement and community members who have been displaced. Align with anti-displacement recommendations made by the executive in the Skyway-West Hill and North Highline Anti-Displacement Strategies report that was completed in September of 2021. Invest in equitable and community-driven development projects that build wealth and financial stability in historically underserved communities, and provide seed funding to community-driven affordable housing projects that are in the early stages of development and support community-based organizations that are conducting pre-development and acquisition and/or construction activities. This RFP was developed collaboratively with Skyway community members. We had 2 public meetings with community members to help determine the fund's uses and the direction of the RFP. And a diverse community advisory committee made up of 8 current and former residents, many of whom grew up in the neighborhood, helped develop the RFP values, criteria, application, questions, and the scoring rubric. The committee members identify as being rooted in communities most impacted by displacement and represented a diverse set of ethnic and cultural backgrounds and included parents, artists, advocates, renters, and homeowners. The RFP is a values-driven document and is really intended for applicants and projects that align with the RFP values. These values were created by the Community Advisory Committee. So I'll go through each one with a little bit more description. So first, leading with equity and social justice. We value efforts that honor First Nations and Black, Indigenous, and people of color community members, and will prioritize projects that are explicit about addressing systemic racism and the institutional barriers that exist for communities of color and other marginalized communities. Center families, elders, and youth. We support efforts which are most likely to bring improvements to the lives of families, elders, and youth who are impacted by displacement and lack of opportunity. Uplift projects that support the community's top 10 priorities. We respect the time and energy Skyway-West Hill residents have put into sharing their needs and priorities with King County, and will prioritize affordable housing projects that are working to support and address the priorities identified by Skyway-West Hill residents in the community's top 10 priority list, which is located on page 108 of the draft Skyway-West Hill sub-area plan. I think Carson just put a link in the chat to that document. It's on the last page. Community empowerment. So we believe in community power and self-determination and are committed to funding projects that are community driven, that build the community's capacity and leadership, and that demonstrate long-term investment in the Skyway-West Hill community. Build infrastructure for community development. We believe in investing in projects that are powered by a community vision and are working for systems change, and we value being an early investor in community-led solutions. Community benefit. We also value projects that are committed to maximizing benefits to the residents of Skyway-West Hill throughout the process and are explicit and intentional about how their projects will employ people from the community and prioritize current residents. Anti-displacement focused. We value projects that are creating affordable housing using an anti-displacement approach, and will prioritize projects that are affirmatively marketed to Skyway-West Hill residents who are at risk of displacement and those who've already been displaced from the neighborhood. Environmental justice. Skyway has long experienced exposure to toxic pollution, contamination, and environmental injustice. We value projects that have innovative development and design approaches to preserve and increase trees and tree canopy and reduce emissions through green building techniques and increased green spaces. So I will pass it on to Kristen to talk about our criteria.
Great, thanks, Yasmin. So let's talk about who can apply for these funds. In this slide, we want to cover the minimum requirements. Because this fund intends to support community-driven projects in various stages, applicants do not need to have prior development experience or a development partner identified in order to be eligible to apply. Applicants also do not need to have identified a site or obtained site control in order to apply. Applicants, however, must meet the following minimum requirements to be considered. The applicant must be a nonprofit organization that is a CBO located community-based organization, CBO, located in Skyway-West Hill, or a CBO with a history of providing programs or services specifically designed to serve Skyway-West Hill residents, or the applicant can be a nonprofit developer or organization working in partnership with a CBO that meets one of the first two criteria. The proposed project must be an affordable housing capital project that includes income restricted housing for the following income levels. And this is based on our fund source restrictions, and should be noted that projects that intend to serve lower income levels may be prioritized for funding. For affordable rental housing, units must serve households with incomes at or below 60% of King County's area median income, which is approximately $69,000 for a family of 4. And for affordable homeownership, units must serve households with incomes between 50 and 80% of area median income, which is approximately $92,000 for a family of 4. And these RFP guidelines, in the RFP guidelines, there's a link. So you all will have that to the King County 2021 area median income and rent levels, which are published by HUD annually. The location of the proposed affordable housing project must be in Skyway-West Hill area of King County. And the RFP also includes a link to a map of Skyway-West Hill. And the applicant must also have a record of demonstrating organizational, racial, and social equity values. And now I'll turn it back to Yasmin.
Thanks, Kristen. So what kinds of projects is this RFP intended for? The following examples are not an exhaustive list of possible applicants. It's really just to illustrate the intended audience for this RFP. And welcome to folks who've just recently joined. We are recording this session in case you've missed part of it and want to rewatch. So the first example is a community-based organization, or CBO for short, that is located in Skyway-West Hill or has strong ties to Skyway-West Hill and is looking for a site. The community-based organization is led by and for Skyway community members at highest risk for displacement, such as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, queer and trans Black, Indigenous, people of color, renters, and or low-income households. The community-based organization has done inclusive community-led planning around anti-displacement and has a clear and compelling vision for an affordable housing project. The CBO is seeking resources to find and identify potential sites and conduct feasibility and due diligence studies to assess and acquire the best site for their project. The second example is a community-based organization located in or with strong ties to Skyway-West Hill that already has site control or owns a property. The CBO serves Skyway-West Hill community members at highest risk for displacement and has been leading an inclusive community-led planning process around redeveloping a site that they own or have site control of into affordable housing. The CBO has a clear and compelling vision for their project and is seeking resources to assess feasibility and complete their site planning and pre-development work. The third example is a values-driven nonprofit affordable housing developer that's working in partnership with a community-based organization located in or with strong ties to Skyway-West Hill, and they are looking for a site. The CBO serves Skyway-West Hill community members at highest risk for displacement. The CBO and the nonprofit developer have been working together to conduct inclusive community-led planning and develop a clear and compelling vision for an affordable housing project. The partners in the partnership are working together on developing an equitable partnership agreement and ownership structure. And the partnership is interested in several parcels in Skyway and is seeking resources to assess and acquire the best site for their project. So to boil it down, we are looking for applicants that meet the minimum requirements and have strong ties to Skyway-West Hill and are aligned with the RFP values, have a clear and compelling project concept, and have capacity to carry out the near-term project work. and can describe to us how they would use funds from this RFP to further their project. So I'll pass it to Kristen.
Thanks, Yasmin. So what activities can awards be made for? There are two activities. One is pre-development. Awards can be made up to $500,000 maximum per project for pre-development activities. And then the second activity is for acquisition and or construction of up to $2 million maximum per project. Applicants can apply for one use, or they can apply for both pre-development and acquisition construction for a maximum of $2.5 million per project. Pre-development funds can be used for costs, including but not limited to hiring a broker to help identify potential sites, completing due diligence studies to see if a site is suitable for an affordable housing project, fees to hire consultants, such as a development consultant, architect, engineer, and lawyers, as well as costs associated with site control and land holding. Acquisition and construction funds can be used for things such as paying for the property, legal fees, land holding costs, and if the acquisition is of an existing building with occupants, the funds can also be used for health and safety inspections and repairs, and for rehabilitation of existing buildings to develop new units and hard construction costs. If applying for both pre-development and acquisition, projects will need to complete an appraisal, initial environmental assessment, and preliminary site capacity plan before accessing any acquisition funds. We anticipate in this funding round to fund 2 or 3 projects total, and we intend to support at least one affordable homeownership project and at least one affordable rental project. And so now I think we're going to pause at this point. We've just gone through a lot of information, and we'd like to stop here and ask what questions you all have on anything you've heard so far. And please feel free to unmute and ask your question or to put it in the chat. Any questions on fund use, eligible activities, who can apply? What are you all thinking?
I can jump in with the question that we received through the registration form. There was one question about, can a for-profit entity partner with a nonprofit organization? The answer is yes, as long as the nonprofit meets the minimum criteria, and the nonprofit would have to be the lead applicant and would be the entity that the county contracts with if they were awarded funds through this process.
Any questions about projects you all are thinking about and whether they would fit this or not? We can certainly try to answer those here.
Good afternoon. My name is London Hare. I'm the owner and CEO of Estate to Freedom, a local development and investment company here in Seattle. And I wanted to follow up on the question that Yasmin, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, that Yasmin answered. And I wanted to know if I wanted to get more clarity on what the distribution of funds would look like between the CBO and the for-profit business if they were to collaborate on a project like this.
That's a good question. I can take a stab at that, Kristen, and then you can let me know if there's anything you would add. Yeah, thanks, London. Nice to meet you. There's not a specific requirement around what the partnership agreement looks like in the RFP. There is a question in the application about partnerships and how the partnership has defined what an equitable partnership agreement means to them, and what steps the partnership has taken to work on an equitable partnership agreement. Any contracting work that, any contract with an organization that's receiving funds would require that there's invoicing for work completed and or sort of reports on updated plans and activities before funds can be used and accessed. So it will be a pretty hands-on process in which the county is involved in approving expenditures, and it will be for work completed, for pre-development and or acquisition. So that will also be primarily with the nonprofit entity or the lead applicant if it was a partnership with a for-profit. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity. I don't know, Kristen, if you would add anything to that or change anything.
No, I think the only thing I was gonna add, which you may have said, is that all the funds do have to be used for capital costs related to the project. And so there is a list of those in the RFP. It's not an exhaustive list, but it is for capital. So the things it cannot be used for like organizational staffing or overhead and costs like that. So all capital related costs, and as Yasmin said, it just depends on what the activities are as far as who's getting the money. Does that help, or are there any follow-up questions on that, London?
That's okay. Super helpful. Okay. And I wanted to ask a follow-up question as well. So I noticed that the RFP is due on March 28th, I believe. When would the funds be? When are you guys looking to select applicants or to select winners? Or
And that's a great question, and we're going to go over that in the next part. But I'll just say that the end of May, I think May 20th might be the date that we're targeting to make decisions, and then the funds would become available as soon as we've made the awards. We would then move into contracting with any awarded projects.
Awesome. Thank you.
And there's more details about this in the fund uses section of the RFP guidelines document. But a portion of the funds will be made available immediately upon execution of a contract. And then the remainder of the funds awarded will have to go through sort of a review and approval process with King County in order to access those funds. And again, as Kristen mentioned in the previous slide, there are some specific due diligence requirements to be able to access acquisition funds, even if you were awarded them. So please definitely read carefully the RFP guidelines and the fund uses section. And feel free to reach out to our RFP coordinator if you have additional questions.
Awesome, thank you. And who is the RFP coordinator?
Hi, that's me. I'm Joanna Armstrong, and I'll be talking a little bit about the process.
Awesome, will do, thank you.
Are there other questions from other folks on the call about particular things you're wondering about, projects you're considering or thinking about? Okay, well, we'll have more time. We'll go through the next section, and then we'll also have some time at the end for things you might think of between now and then. So I think we can move forward, Yasmin.
All right, as I just said, I'm Joanna Armstrong. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the RFP coordinator for the Skyway 5 million affordable housing RFP. I'm the one you'll contact if you have any questions or concerns, and that email address you see there is how you will contact me. We're going to take a few minutes to just go over the process for the application. Proposals can be submitted in two different ways. The first is Zoom grants, which you see the website there. And you would go into that website and follow all the instructions. There's several tabs with questions and attached documents that we're requesting, and you can fill them out in any order. Just make sure they're complete. And if you submit via Zoom grants, they will flag you if there's any sections that are left incomplete. Another way that you can submit your proposal is by email. If you do submit your proposal by email, we recommend that you download all the RFP documents, which you can find in the library tab of Zoom grants, and read through them very carefully, because we want to make sure that anything you submit is complete and that you've attached all the documents that are required and answered all the questions. So please just make sure you follow the instructions carefully. And proposals are due by 1 p.m. on Monday, March 28th. And we do have the deadline in the middle of the day on Monday, so that you have sufficient time or access to technical support. So anyone at Zoom grants can help you out. And you can also email me if you're having any technical difficulties or have any last minute questions. And please note that any proposals that are late or incomplete may not be accepted and may not be scored. Next, I'll pass to Jim.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Gayton, also with DCHS Contracting and Procurement. So what we have on the screen now is a snapshot of part of the Zoom grants application. When you go into this opportunity, this is what you'll see. Just want to point out a couple of the most important aspects of this. First, as Joanna just mentioned, there's a library tab that contains a bunch of documents that have been uploaded by the county into Zoom grants. Again, highly recommend that you look through these documents, as they provide really important information about the background of the program or of the fund and what we're trying to do, as well as program requirements for your proposals as they come in. Next, we have sort of the 4 tabs along the bottom, the first of which is applicant information. This is just basically your contact information and some contact information for your organization. The second tab is, again, some more information about the project you're proposing and your organization. Included on that tab that I wanted to mention specifically is a statement that your organization understands there's a King County executive order that exists requiring certain workers of county contractors be vaccinated. I think there's just a checkbox that says, yes, I understand and will comply. The thing I want people to understand is, by checking that box, you are not stating that your organization is currently in compliance with that mandate, or that by checking that box, you're even admitting the mandate applies to your workers. You may get an award and your project may not be subject to that executive order. We just need to include something in the procurement that indicates that you as a bidder are aware of that obligation should you get an award and should it apply at some point down the road. The last 2 tabs are really sort of the meat of the application. The proposal question tabs is, again, a series of narrative or long answer questions. In this, we ask about additional background information on your organization, on your project, how your project has included the Skyway-West Hill community, and how it reflects the values that are described in the procurement. And then, as mentioned earlier, there's a capacity element to this. So we ask about the capacity of your organization to sort of use these funds to get started on the project you're proposing. We have occasionally had issues with Zoom grants and bidders. It's a third-party application, so the King County doesn't maintain it. We have to, the company that maintains it is actually in Denver. But occasionally things go wrong and people wait to the last minute to submit things. I think the best way for you all to sort of approach this, or what we're recommending anyway, is that you can draft your answers in a Word document, have that saved separately, and then copy and paste those answers into your Zoom grants application. And then the application itself automatically saves your responses when you sort of move from field to field. It'll indicate that on the application when you're doing it, that things are being saved. So we just recommend that as you sort of do that, as you copy and paste things, that you always tab somewhere else on the document so that your work is saved, and then it won't be lost as you upload it or paste it into the Zoom grants application. All told, we're looking at proposal responses that should be no longer than 12 pages for these narrative questions. So as you're writing your Word document, you can use that as a guide. Lastly, the attachments documents, the attachments tab are documents that we're asking you all to upload into Zoom grants. These include an organizational chart, showing the leadership of your organization, financial statements, recent financial statements for your organization, a proposed project work plan, and a project budget. There is a document that you're supposed to download and provide to community references. That document is in the library, and then the reference form should be submitted by those references directly to DCHS at the email address that Joanna shared earlier. Next. This shows sort of the stages of the evaluation period, or the things that we're going to do after proposals come in. The first stage is just an administrative review. This is where Joanna or I will sort of look at the applications as they've been submitted and determine whether they meet the administrative requirements of the RFP. I don't think there are many. The most important of which Joanna mentioned, and that is that the response is received on time. So if you're having last second deadline or last second technical issues, email stuff. It's better to give us all the information needed in multiple different ways. We can figure out how to piece together, or we can actually be in touch with you all to piece together a whole application. What we can't really do is sort of accept applications that are late. So if you're having issues, just email anything you have to Joanna. We will work with you to figure out what those answers are. After that administrative review, your applications are then distributed to the evaluation panel members. They will read each question that gets scored and look at each attachment that gets scored, and assign sort of a preliminary score on a 0 to 10 point basis. There's a table in the application that or in the RFP that talks generally about what qualities a high and low scoring answer will have. So pay attention to that table when crafting your responses to the individual questions. After that sort of initial score is assigned by the evaluators, we'll bring everybody together to have a discussion of what they've read. The purpose of this is to make sure that the evaluators have the same general understanding of what's being proposed. Our goal is not for all evaluators to agree on a score. It's just for them to agree on the content of what they're scoring. So one person may read an answer one way, and one person may read it another way, or interpret information one way, and arrive at various different scores, but if one person is sort of making a mistake in their interpretation, we want to correct that mistake so they can assign the score based on what was intended in the proposal. So after that, the evaluation panel members will assign a final score. You'll notice in the RFP that each question and each attachment has sort of a weight if it's being scored. What we'll do is we'll take the panel score, multiply it by the weight, and then get a weighted score for each question, and then we'll average those questions among the panel members for each question or section. And then the sum of all of that ends up being your final scores for this part of the proposal. After that, the interview or the evaluation panel has the option to ask for additional information or clarification from you as a bidder, or to ask some bidders to come in and have an interview or participate in an interview process. If we do this, we'll work with each bidder that's being asked to participate in that individually and come up with a mutually agreeable time to conduct that interview. It's not going to be necessarily dictated by us saying, this is your date, this is your time, make people available. I think our intent is to make sure that you have adequate time to respond to questions and present information that the evaluation panel wants to see. At that point, scores are sort of finalized and the panel will make award recommendations to the DCHS director. Final awards will be made by him. That's just kind of part of the county code. But the determination of those final awards will be based on a number of factors, including equity and geographic considerations. That part's a little bit less important here since we have a very narrow geography in which to make these awards to begin with. But once those are made, awards will be communicated to all bidders. You'll either get a notice, a letter that's saying you won, or a letter saying you did not. And then I pass it back to Joanna, I think.
All right, you see in front of you an overall timeline of the process. This is sort of just a high level overview. If you want to see more fleshed out dates, please look at the RFP guidelines document. We have specific dates for everything after the deadline to submit RFP proposals. So some dates for you to be aware of is March 14th. That's going to be the final day that you can submit any substantive questions about the RFP. We need a little bit of time to talk amongst ourselves and talk with the community members to get answers. And we want to give you all time to process those answers and make any changes if necessary to your applications. March 14th is also the last day to submit a request for grant writing assistance, which we'll go over in just a minute. We do need to give our consultants a little bit of time to be able to work with you as well. And proposals are due again 1 p.m. on Monday, March 28th. So following the submission deadline, we've got a couple of other dates here that are approximate. They're estimates depending on how the process goes. And again, if you want some more dates and more fleshed out timeline, please look at the RFP guidelines document in the library tab of Zoom grants. And please keep in mind, these dates are subject to change. If we do make any changes to the timeline, we will post it to the Zoom grants library tab. And we'll flag it as an amendment. So please continue to check the library tab to make sure you haven't missed out on any new information. And next, we'll talk a little bit about the grant writing assistance. So we're excited to be partnering with Communities Rise. They'll be offering applicants up to an hour of grant writing assistance. And there's some more information on how to access this assistance and what kind of assistance you can get in the RFP document and in the applications document. So we'll put those links in the chat, and then I'll hand it to Brianna from Communities Rise to provide a little more information about the services they offer.
Thank you, Joanna. Hey, y'all. Good morning, I believe. We're still in the morning. Nice to be here with y'all this morning. I'm Brianna. I use they, them pronouns. I'm with Communities Rise as the Director of Capacity Building, and I get to work with our consultants in supporting y'all in grant writing needs. There's links in the chat that give a bit more detail about the grant writing support we're able to offer, as well as some stuff on the slide. I just wanted to quickly share some of the ways folks have used grant writing support in the past. And so if you meet our eligibility requirements and are interested in having a grant writing consultant review a draft of your RFP and give feedback, walk through just the RFP itself and answer questions about the RFP, and give a walkthrough of the document, as well as just doing a full comprehensive draft review with comments on what you've worked on the RFP so far. All of those are things that our grant writing consultant folks could help with. The one thing that feels worth noting is just that they are not able to write the RFP itself. So comments they are able to do, but as far as writing any of the RFP, they are unable to do. Yeah, and there's more info at the links in the chat. Otherwise, I'm available for questions about what the grant writing support looks like for the RFP. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Brianna. That was great. So again, you can download all the RFP documents from the library tab in Zoom Grants. The link is right there and it's in the chat. And if you have any other questions, feedback, concerns, you can contact me. I'm the RFP coordinator and my email address is right up there. So we just want to reiterate again, it's very important that you're reviewing all the RFP documents very carefully. They're all available. And now that this is a live procurement, now that it's out there, then I really do need to be the sole point of contact. So if you have any questions, I am the person that needs to be contacted. And the reason for this is just so we can make sure everybody is getting the same information and that any questions I receive, I can post on Zoom Grants and share out with everybody else. So all the questions that have been asked in this info session and the first one on Monday, we'll be writing out and adding as an amendment to the RFP, hopefully by the end of this week. So you'll be able to see all the questions anybody's asked. So with that, are there any final questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself or put your questions in the chat. All right, if there's nothing else, again, like I said, we will post all the questions that have been asked and their answers to Zoom Grants in an amendment. We'll also have recordings of, I believe, this session and the session on Monday so that you can go review the other info session if you'd like. And if any questions come to you after, feel free to email me. And thank you all. Appreciate everybody coming today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.